I'd like to introduce to you the faith development teachers for our learning together this year. Susan Kelly will be with us again, offering programs for our kindergarten through third graders. Susan has been with UUCGL for a very long time, and we're very happy to have the continuity of her warm presence. Susan teaches at Creative Corner Children's Center in Winchester. Beth Tulin of Salem will be teaching our 4th through 6th grade group and offering occasional time for all ages segments in our online worship. Beth is a longtime UU with Quaker tendencies, a naturalist and an environmental educator, a social justice activist, an avid reader, and an amateur gardener. She lives with her wife, Catherine, who has been a DRE at several churches, their daughter, Aurora, who just turned 18 and is making plans for college, and their black cat, Bast. Beth is currently serving as the interim director of religious education at First Church in Salem. Whiskey Walensky will be leading our program for 7th and 8th graders. He is a lifelong Swampscott resident. His family started attending UUCGL in the fall of 2002. His 2 daughters were 2 and 4 at that time and went through the whole religious education program. Whiskey has taught for almost each of the last 15 years, whatever program was offered for 7th and 8th graders. He says he's currently on the Faith Development Ministry team, 7th year maybe. In the past, I was chair of the music committee and was a member of the recent music director and religious education director search committees. And he says, I put up those lights each Halloween, which I think is a reference to our wonderful Halloween parties we always have at church. Kate Henneberry is a lifelong Unitarian Universalist. She's been attending our church since the age of 3, when she was dedicated by Reverend Bob Slater. Kate is entering her 11th year of leading our senior high youth group. She was a member of the youth group herself throughout high school in the old YRUU days. In addition to leading fun and social events with the group, she's taught curriculum including Coming of Age, Be the Change, and A Chorus of Faiths. Outside of the youth group, Kate is a trained social worker who manages the Alumni Services Department at Youth Build USA, a global nonprofit that assists opportunity youth gain education, job training, leadership skills, and service hours. Chris Scheller will be offering a parenting group at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Greater Lynn this year. He lives with his wife, Liz, in Winchester. They are the parents of two daughters, Kimmy, 7, and Annabelle, 2 years old. Chris grew up in Newton, Mass. He has traveled extensively. He came back to study ministry at Harvard Divinity School, and he started off his ministry teaching mindfulness in schools. And for the last 8 years, he's been directing Unitarian Universalist religious education and lifelong learning. So we really look forward to having Chris with us leading that parenting group. We're really grateful to have these wonderful creative teachers with us for this Together in Spirit year, and we will be starting a search for a Director of Community Life and Learning in the winter. Mary Gatlin is the chair of our Faith Development Ministry team this year. You may be of a generation that remembers when everything was closed on Sundays. In Jewish communities whose Sabbath day is Saturday, of course, all the businesses were closed on that day. Life slowed down. People went for a Sunday drive. In a less secular and less diverse America, the expectation was that most people would be attending church on Sunday morning, and there was at least a remnant of old school Sabbath observances. When I was a kid, we got bored on Sundays. There was nothing to do, or so we felt, and my parents, who badly needed a day of rest and relaxation, would say to us, "Go entertain yourselves." They didn't think that boredom was bad for us or their problem to solve. The Sabbath has been called the gift of the Jews to humanity. It's not just a day, but it's a commitment to the soul, to the deeper self that can only emerge when we divest from what Thomas Merton called the violence of busyness and overwork. Right now, when so many of our activities are made impossible by the pandemic, and we might be really weary of hearing children say, "I'm bored," there's nowhere to go and nothing to do, and believe me, plenty of adults are saying that as well. It might seem like adding insult to injury to talk about creating and keeping a Sabbath. We might say, well, we're already limiting our activities. We're already stopping so many things that we love doing. I know you are. I know I am. I know your children are, and your families and your friends and your loved ones. And I also know this. Sabbath is a gift. It is a gift to humanity. It's one of the most humanizing spiritual practices that exists. A practice that can help us become psychologically stronger, to maintain emotional and spiritual well-being, the wholeness that in Hebrew is called shalom, not just right now, but for the rest of our lives. Abraham Heschel, who wrote a very, very beautiful book about the Sabbath, says that the Sabbath plants the seeds of eternity in the soul. And that starts when we stop. It starts when we say, the sun is setting, or the appointed hour is nigh, and I'm going to stop. I'm going to put away my work and do that for 24 hours. So is that giving you an anxiety attack, the thought of doing that for a whole 24 hours? Because if you ignore email for 24 hours, you might cause frustration or anger, and you might get a bad performance review, right? Because if you don't keep working ahead of the next project, you'll definitely fall behind, and you'll wind up with this huge stressful disaster. I'm listening to my own voices in my head sometimes like this. Because if you stop working for 24 hours, and I don't just mean professional jobs work, I also mean cleaning, fixing stuff, making phone calls you feel obligated to make, all of that unpaid work that people do. What will people think of you? What will you think of yourself? If you stop working and keeping busy with projects that you can tick off on the I was productive today box, what if you meet up with yourself? That might be scary too. But I have to tell you that now more than ever, we cannot avoid the seriousness of needing to stop. Your jobs right now, most of you, are in your homes. And your children's school, which is their work, is also in your home. And so the days have a tendency to bleed together and blend together. And having electricity and Wi-Fi means that we can plug our bodies and our brains and our emotional responses and our attention directly into work every hour of the day and the night. And that's exactly what's happening for some of you and for your kids. It's just like technology, stress, work right into the mind. And then there's no space for anything else to get in there, let alone the still small voice of the holy. And that's a good way to totally lose it. Sabbath was not instituted so that children could play frisbee or that adults could veg out in bed with a book, although those are both great Sabbath activities. It was instituted for a deeply important spiritual and psychological reason, to teach humanity that the world has already been created and can survive without our effort for one day out of 7. So you know where this comes from, right? Right? The Bible story, in the central creation story of all Western civilization in the book of Genesis, God makes the world in 6 days and rests on the 7th, and then gives the commandments, the 10 commandments to Moses on Mount Sinai, commandments meant for all of humanity. And it's interesting that the commandments around the Sabbath are much more specific than any of the other ones. And I'm going to read this for you. This is translated by Everett Fox from the 5 books of Moses. Remember the Sabbath day to hallow it. For 6 days you are to serve, and you are to make all your work. But the seventh day is Sabbath for Yod-He Vav-He, and that's the transliteration of the sacred name of Hashem, the Holy One, your God. You are not to make any kind of work, not you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your servant, nor your maid, nor your beast, nor your sojourner that is within your gates. For in 6 days Yod-He Vav-He made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in it, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore Yod-He Vav-He gave the Sabbath day his blessing, and he hallowed it. So notice that this is not just personal behavior, personal rest that God is talking about. Not only can you not work, neither can your children, and neither can anyone who works for you. I hope you noticed that. Not even your animals. This is not just about assuring individual well-being, but communal spiritual renewal and sanity and survival. Everyone rests, including the earth. So there's an environmental component here as well. So this Sabbath commandment is actually one that echoes our second Unitarian Universalist principle, or I should of course say our Unitarian Universalist second principle echoes the Sabbath commandment. And I'll remind you that our second principle is that we affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Not even the sojourner should work on the Sabbath day. As I said, Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote one of the most beautiful books on the Sabbath, and he points out that in a surprising departure from accustomed religious thinking, God did not make a sacred place after the creation of heaven and earth, as it is in other traditions, but God created a sacred time. And this would prove to be profoundly important given the subsequent experience of the Jewish people, whose sacred places would often be destroyed and its people persecuted and dispersed. Heschel reminds us that Judaism is a religion of time, aiming at the sanctification of time. The Sabbaths are our great cathedrals. The seventh day is a palace in time, which we build. And of course, it is Rosh Hashanah this weekend, the Jewish New Year. The significant mood of that sacred time is one of intimacy and longing and love. The Hebrew language used for the welcoming of the Sabbath is the same language used for a bridegroom welcoming the bride on their wedding day. Le Kadesh. So let me present a little biblical puzzle to you. It says in Genesis, on the seventh day, God finished God's work. But on the seventh day, we thought was entirely for rest. Why does it not say that God finished God's work on the sixth day? Well, ancient rabbis concluded that there must have been one last act of creation on the seventh day, a little pièce de résistance. On the seventh day, the rabbis taught, God created menucha. Now, this word you might translate as rest, but it's so much more than that. Menucha means tranquility, serenity, peace, and repose. It is a state of being in which there's no strife, no struggle, no fighting, no fear, and no distrust. A kind of an active peace. Imagine all of creation having saved this last gift for us. And imagine all of creation inviting you to participate in this gift, in this palace in time, in the same way a lover invites their beloved into an embrace. I hope that you will create a Sabbath day for yourself and your family. You're going to have to decide how you define work that you will intentionally divest from. But however you do, I hope that you will do so not in a spirit of denial, but embracing the freedom to pursue that menucha that we all so desperately need. Leave the house and walk in the woods, which I know so many of you already do. Ride your bicycles rather than drive. Tell the children, and perhaps you and your partner or your friends or family can agree, that we will try not to argue on the Sabbath day because we're seeking menucha and we all really need it. Prepare a beautiful meal. Keep a screenless Sabbath, or half of a Sabbath perhaps. Read poetry or literature or a trashy novel. Do some crafting. Try not to spend any money. Learn how to play an instrument. Sing. Or make love, which in the Jewish tradition is a special mitzvah to do on the Sabbath. The point is that this is not a luxury. Let me say it again. This is not a luxury. And it is not some kind of esoteric spiritual practice. I want to remind us all today that we have but one precious life to live, and that one life was never intended to be spent in ceaseless labor and concern. However, because the larger society will not willingly make room for us to breathe deeply of tranquility and to have long consecutive hours of renewal and rededication to the soul, we have to fight for it. 6 days a week, we wrestle with the world, writes Abraham Joshua Heschel, wringing profit from the earth. On the Sabbath day, we especially care for the seed of eternity planted in the soul. Blessed Sabbath to you. Light a candle. Drink wine. Softly the Sabbath has plucked the sinking sun. Slowly the Sabbath descends, the rose of heaven in her hand. How can the Sabbath plant a huge and shining flower in a blind and narrow heart? How can the Sabbath plant the bud of angels in a heart of raving flesh? Can the rose of immortality grow in an age enslaved to destruction, an age enslaved to death? Light a candle. Drink wine. Slowly the Sabbath descends, and in her hand the flower, and in her hand the sinking sun. In this moment together, may we be present to the spirit of the Sabbath and open to its loving embrace and yearning for each and every one of us. Shabbat Shalom, Sabbath blessings, Sabbath peace.
To everyone, let our
Ta-ta.